Welcome to Perspectives. I'm Bob Lubzelder, and our guest today is Betsy Bashore. She's the CEO of D-Day Ohio. Hello, Betsy.
Hello, how are you?
I'm doing good. And I don't know if everybody knows this. Betsy is in charge of the whole D-Day thing in Conneaut, which is no longer just a couple of days in August, but it pretty much transforms the entire summer with the museum and all. But she is the CEO and she lives in Columbus. So I'm wondering, did you decide to take this job because you got a really great car with a great stereo and you want to drive it around, or how'd you get the job?
Yeah, well, I wish that was the case. I have worked for the state for almost 30 years now, and I was at a regional office and then assigned to Columbus. And I've been down here part-time for 8 years, and I decided to make the move permanent a couple of years ago. So before that, I drove from Maumee out to Conneaut.
Which isn't any better, is it?
And it's actually a half an hour shorter coming
Oh.
from Maumee to Toledo, so I added to my drive this time.
What made you decide you wanted to do this?
Well, I've been reenacting since I was in seventh grade. And I started reenacting at the community service project, really loved it. And I got involved in World War II about 20 years ago. And about 2002, I attended my first D-Day, Conneaut. And in 2005, I started helping out with the camp and with the organization. I became the treasurer. And then I think in 2010 or 2011, I became CEO.
So it's been about 10 years.
Yeah. It's been 11 years that I've been working with the organization as it is today.
Okay, all right. And D-Day, for a town that has no more connection to D-Day than any other city in Ohio, it's really kind of bloomed here, and people have kind of adopted it.
Mm-hmm. Yes, very much so. And well, D-Day, Conneaut, and Conneaut, Ohio don't have a whole lot to do with the D-Day in Normandy. The event started when a gentleman named John Keaton was walking along the beach. His wife was visiting her family in Conneaut, and he looked up and he said, "Oh my goodness, this looks so much like Omaha Beach here." And he started the event. He started that in 1999.
And it was much, 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 much smaller then.
It was, and in fact, the event as it is today was much smaller 10 years ago. We've had tremendous growth probably the first 5 years, and then we've held pretty steady at what we feel is our maximum number of participants the past 5 years or so.
How many people show up for reenactors are there?
This past year we had 1,503 reenactors check in.
So this was 2019?
Yes, in 2019. The prior year we had 1,413, I think. And so it's right around that 1,400 to 1,500 reenactor level. That's the maximum we can really handle on site.
Well, it sure brings the crowds, and which I think is going to be the next big problem is how do you get everybody to seated and being able to see something.
Mm-hmm. I know that a lot of the spectators have trouble seeing, and so generally they'll come back the next year or the next day a little bit earlier so they can get a better seat. My theory has always been that we will have a leveling out in attendance when no one wants to wait in line for the porta potties anymore, or no one wants to wait in line for food, or they can't see the battle. But each year we seem to grow a little bit more. Now, we think that 2019 was probably the high watermark for a while because it was the 75th anniversary of D-Day, and we estimate we had between 60,000 and 65,000 attendees and spectators. And we also think that because of COVID, the next time we're permitted to hold an event, there'll probably be a smaller number of people willing to come out at that point.
They're just going to be a little scared to be in with a crowd that size.
Yes, absolutely. Even if it's outdoors, I think people are a little leery of that right now.
Well, I've taken pictures of it, and if you see any of the pictures I took or anybody else of the crowd, I mean, they are just jammed together, the spectators.
Yes, and a couple of years ago, John Carapello, one of our photographers, took pictures from the boat, and he did a panorama starting at the Port Authority side all the way over past the gazebo, and it was just a sea of different shirts. It's just amazing to see.
Kind of like Woodstock.
Yes.
So you had to kind of switch gears this year, downsize quite a bit, but try to retain the flavor of the D-Day event by having a series of reenactors at the museum, which is a few blocks away. And how did that go?
It went really well. We decided in May, looking at the trend, and our board has folks from a wide variety of backgrounds. So we have a gentleman who's in the medical community and a couple other people who are associated with medicine. And they said, listen, it's probably not going to happen this year. So we decided to let our partner organizations off the hook early. So we made that decision in May. But we were trying to figure out what we could do, because for our reenacting community, being able to go out and spend the weekend with a small group of friends and get to talk to people about what you love is really important. And for the community, we think it's important to continue to be a presence, even if we can't do a large event, even if that's ill-advised this year. So we decided, starting July 4th weekend, that we would try to have a reenacting group or a couple of groups numbering no more than 10 people out to do demonstrations at the museum each weekend. And we successfully scheduled all but 2 of the weekends.
And can you describe like some of the reenactment? There were some kind of like themes?
Generally, it was themed around the groups that agreed to attend. So we had the 29th Division that landed on Omaha Beach. They came out for one weekend and talked about the landing and what that entailed. We had a group that does 5th Rangers. They came out for a weekend, also talked about preparations for D-Day and what the Rangers did at that time. We had a group come out that did German communications, and they demonstrated switchboards and radio communications that the Germans would have used in the field. And that weekend we had a companion setup of U.S. Signal Corps radios and communication devices. So there was quite a number of different things that occurred over the weekends. There were some weekends where we had an individual representing Front Resistance, another individual representing U.S., another individual representing German, and so kind of that whole panorama of the participants during D-Day.
That got people into the museum, I think, too. People were driving by and they saw these people camped out in their tents and everything in their uniforms and talked to them, and then they decided to visit the museum.
Absolutely. And what we did notice is that our first probably 4 or 5 weeks that we were doing this, we had very high museum attendance. And then we started to see people come back to see what the reenactors were doing, but they'd already been to the museum, so they might not be going indoors.
I was there one weekend, and a woman was there with her son, and she says, I can't believe I live only a few blocks from this place, and I've never been here before. And then you saw a lot of people from Pittsburgh, a lot of people from Erie, Youngstown, all over.
And we did advertise those on our social media platforms. So we were reaching out to people who might be an hour away or 45 minutes away and encouraging them to come up and spend a day in Conneaut.
Yeah, I mean, and like the regular D-Day weekends, that it brought people to the restaurants and that sort of thing. I mean, I think all the restaurants in Conneaut should donate, because they got a lot of people that were coming in from like Youngstown and all, and they'd ask, well, you know, what places are there to eat, and where's the lake from here, and all that sort of thing.
Oh, absolutely.
So, what is going to happen this next year? You really don't know. You said you have like 3 possible plans.
We do, and these are ones that our board will talk about over the winter. We're obviously going to track what's going on with COVID very closely and the potential for a vaccine. In a best case scenario, we would be able to hold the event again. That probably would not attract 60,000 people. It probably would not attract 1,500 reenactors. We're expecting maybe 30% spectators. 50% of our reenactors might come out in the next year after the pandemic. So that's our best case scenario. Our kind of middle of the road, we proposed this year, but because it was still so new with COVID and there was a rise in cases while we were talking to the health department about it, we were hoping again to promote the idea of doing 3 much smaller events. And instead of having a big battle and all of the different things you can see, having a subsection of that and providing tours so that people would stay in a small group together. We could keep track of who is together, and they would be watched through the displays and demonstrations. That's kind of the middle ground, and if we are still in the same circumstances that we are today in August of next year or even in May, we'll look at doing the same thing that we did at the museum this past year, but we would do it each weekend. And we also own a lot oh goodness, probably just 2 parcels down from the
Right.
museum, that we might have a second group come and set up camp in that location.
Would you start a little earlier next year, maybe in May?
Absolutely. And the only reason we started the 4th of July was because we didn't get the okay on museum openings until the middle of June. And so we needed that couple of weeks to get our volunteers together and begin recruiting our groups to come in. But we would plan to open as normal on Memorial Day weekend.
You had to do some reconfigurating with the museum as well.
Absolutely. Yes,
go ahead.
We've had some new donations, and I know there's a lot of things that have come in over the past year. So we would probably want to look at some rearranging to freshen that for the groups coming in next year. But we would also try to tie our programs more closely to some of the artifacts in the museum.
But some of the changes were simply because of COVID. You had toys and things that kids could play with that they couldn't have there, and
Right.
so you had to replace it with something else.
Yes, we used to have like a try-on uniforms area and some more hands-on types of activities, and those, of course, we can't do during COVID. We also had to limit the number of people on a floor at any given time to provide enough room for social distancing. And there's, of course, the hand sanitizer and masks, wiping down surfaces, all those things that we needed to do to make sure we were compliant with the state regulations.
Betsy Bashore is our guest, and she is the CEO of D-Day Ohio. And so do you have any figuring out what's going to happen with the museum next year? Are you going to rearrange things, or does it depend on donations or what?
A little bit of both. I mean, obviously we plan to freshen up the displays a little bit, provide some new things to see. Since our museum has been in existence, this will be the 4th year that it's been open, and each year we get an increase of donations, and so it gives us an opportunity to look through what we have to present and to provide something new for someone attending the museum to see each time they come.
One thing interesting about the museum is it was the only museum in Conneaut that was open during the summer, was able to open, so that's kind of a star right there.
Well, it was, and part of that was because we were able to rely on some of our younger reenactors to come in and occasionally supplement our docents, and also we have generally a younger group of docents than some of the other museums in town.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's true. I was, there's also people, I mean, I was there at different times, and you'd have people that would spend an hour and a half up on the first floor, and they'd say, well, this is a really great museum, and thank you. And then I would say, have you been downstairs? Because you have the 1940s recreation of the 40s kitchen and bedroom and different things. About working, it wasn't working when beginning of the year, but by the end it was working. Was a Victrola, a record player of the 40s. It was really interesting.
And it was really cool to see that be repaired and be able to use it again and learn about how record players worked in the 1930s and 40s.
I didn't realize that. It's like after every few records, you have to replace the needle or change the needle or something.
You have to rotate it 90 degrees so you get a new sharp edge. Yeah. There's a lot of effort involved in some of the things that we take very much for granted.
Right. And people in the museum, that everybody says, my mother had a sewing machine like that, or we have a canner that looks like the canner there. And it's just, everybody that goes there seems to enjoy it.
There's a lot of things that folks can really relate to. I mean, the upstairs being the military section, they might have a parent or grandparent who was involved in World War II, but maybe in Korea or Vietnam. And so some of those things transcend the era. And then, of course, on the basement floor, we have the home front area, and there's a lot of things. Same thing. I saw them at my grandma's house. She had a stove very much like the stove down there. Mm-hmm. I have a stove very much like the stove down there. So, kind of living the 1940s lifestyle.
Things could be worse than that.
Yes.
Okay, we are out of time. Betsy Bashore. Looking forward to next year and see what happens with D-Day. Something will be going on, correct? No matter what.
Absolutely. No matter what. We'll be there, and we'll be ready to talk about what happened on that day in 1944.
Excellent. I'm Bob Lebzelder, and this has been Perspectives.
Thanks so much, Bob.
Thank you.